You don't get to die on me now. Not after all this." Dr. Roman Hale's voice cracked, his breath frosting in the Michigan air as he pressed his hands against her chest. Snowflakes melted on her eyelashes, her pulse fading beneath his trembling fingers. "Stay with me, please." The sirens were still too far away. Blood streaked his white coat like a confession. "Why her?" he whispered to no one. "Why her, when I've spent my whole life saving strangers I never cared about?" The girl's lips moved faintly, one broken syllable. "Why, now?" And then, silence. Now let me tell you how this incredible story unfolded. But before you continue, take a quiet second. Become part of this journey. Subscribe, not just to follow a channel, but to stay connected. Share your heart in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from, because your support keeps these stories alive. Now, let's begin. Snow had already buried most of Detroit's suburbs when Dr. Roman Hale pulled his Aston Martin through the wrought iron gates of Bloomfield Hills Estate, his private Michigan sanctuary. The press called him the Miracle Machine, the surgeon whose hands were worth more than most people's homes. But inside those hands, inside that flawless precision, lived nothing but emptiness. He didn't attend funerals, he didn't send flowers, he didn't believe in God or love, only in the predictable rhythm of a heartbeat under his scalpel. That night, though, even the rhythm of his own heart felt mechanical. The radio droned about a blizzard advisory as he poured a glass of whiskey and looked out over the white expanse of his estate. Somewhere beyond those trees, the city bled poverty, sickness, and stories he didn't care to know. He told himself he'd earned the right not to feel. A few miles away, Zariah Fields, a 26-year-old nursing student, sprinted through the storm toward the Meyer parking lot in Pontiac. Her shift at St. Joseph Mercy Hospital had ended late, and her old Honda refused to start. Her phone battery blinked 1%. She'd been saving for a new car, but tuition and her mom's medication always came first. She tugged her jacket tighter, her breath visible, muttering a prayer she wasn't sure anyone was listening to. When the cold became too sharp to bear, she sat against a lamppost, phone clutched like a lifeline, snow rising around her boots. "God, just give me one more chance to keep going," she whispered. Meanwhile, Roman's estate staff had begged him not to drive that night, but the surgeon hated stillness. He preferred movement, anything to drown out the guilt he never named. He took his black Mercedes down Woodward Avenue, heading nowhere. That's when the snow thickened, and the headlights carved through a white wall that swallowed the world whole. And then, something dark and human collapsed in front of his car. He slammed the brakes. The sound, metal shrieking against ice, ripped through the quiet. He jumped out, coat flaring open. The figure was curled on the asphalt, her skin ashen, lips blue. A young black woman, no ID, no pulse he could feel through her glove. "Damn it," he muttered, kneeling beside her. His instincts took over, compressions, breath, pressure. But there was something in her face that disarmed him. Not fear, not pain, just peace, like she'd already made peace with the cold. He checked her pupils. "Come on, don't quit now." The irony hit him like a punch. He, the man who never cared to save anyone beyond the operating room, was fighting for the life of a stranger in the snow. The snowstorm howled around them, sirens distant. Roman wrapped his scarf around her and lifted her into his car. Her head rolled against his shoulder. He called 911, giving his coordinates, his voice sharp but uneven. "It's Dr. Hale, female, mid-20s, unconscious. Possible hypothermia. I'm driving her to St. Joseph's myself. Don't make me wait." The dispatcher started to respond, but he hung up before they could object. When he reached the hospital, nurses scrambled as soon as they saw him, but something strange happened. Roman didn't leave after signing her in. He stood by her gurney, his eyes fixed on her pale face as if waiting for proof that she'd chosen to survive. "Who is she?" a nurse asked quietly. "I don't know," he said, his voice low. "But she didn't deserve to freeze alone." The nurse frowned. "Nobody does, doctor." Roman didn't answer. His gaze flickered to her hand, where faint scars traced her knuckles, signs of hard work, not privilege. Something stirred in him, uninvited. He'd been called heartless by journalists, colleagues, even ex-lovers. But right then, looking at her, the label didn't feel like armor, it felt like a wound. And for the first time in years, Dr. Roman Hale couldn't look away. If you've ever passed by someone who looked invisible, maybe you know the guilt that lingers later, the kind that keeps you awake, wondering if you could have done something. Maybe that's a reason to stay, because stories like this remind us we still can. The next morning, the world outside St. Joseph Mercy Hospital looked like a winter painting, perfect and merciless. The snow reflected everything white and clean, but inside room 317, it only magnified guilt. Dr. Roman Hale hadn't gone home. He sat in the recliner beside the hospital bed, still wearing last night's blood-streaked coat. The girl, Zaria Fields, lay unconscious under a thermal blanket, her oxygen steady now, her skin no longer gray. He had operated through wars, chaos, and celebrity demands, yet nothing felt as nerve-wracking as waiting for a stranger to breathe without his help. When the door creaked open, Police Chief Grant Ellison stepped in, mid-50s, rugged, the kind of man whose handshake felt like a judgment. "Dr. Hale," he said, flipping open his notebook, "appreciate what you did out there. You mind if I ask a few questions?" Roman nodded. "She was collapsed in the road. I stopped. That's all." Ellison studied him. "You drive alone through a blizzard at midnight, find an unconscious woman, bring her here yourself, and you don't know who she is?" Roman's jaw tightened. "You think I hit her?" "Not saying that." The chief closed the notebook slowly. "Just saying you don't strike me as the kind who stops for anybody." Roman almost smirked. "I wasn't planning to. Maybe that's why I did." Later that afternoon, Zaria stirred. The first thing she saw was the face everyone in Michigan recognized from billboards, the heart surgeon who rebuilt lives but never smiled. Her lips parted, her voice a whisper. "You're that doctor." Roman leaned forward. "Dr. Hale. You're safe now." Her brow furrowed. "How long was I out?" "About 10 hours." She swallowed hard. "My mom's going to be worried sick. I work the night shift. Roman cut in, his tone softer than he expected. "The hospital contacted your emergency number. They couldn't reach anyone." Zaria looked away. "Phone bill's overdue. Guess that's why." Silence stretched. Outside, snow blew against the window like static. Roman said, almost to himself, "You shouldn't have been out there." She smiled faintly. "You shouldn't have either." That quiet defiance caught him off guard. No gratitude, no awe. Just a simple truth. By the next day, she could walk again. But the hospital insisted on keeping her under observation, mostly because Roman Hale insisted. He told himself it was clinical curiosity. He told himself a lot of things. During her meal, Zaria tried to eat but winced when she moved her wrist. Roman stepped forward automatically. "You sprained it. Let me." She froze. "You always this controlling?" He blinked. Nobody ever spoke to him like that. I'm used to fixing things. Maybe not everything needs fixing." Her words lingered. Later, while reviewing her chart, he noticed she'd been working multiple jobs. Nursing assistant, delivery driver, part-time caregiver at an elderly home in Ferndale. A life stitched together by exhaustion. He found himself asking the nurse on duty, "Does she have insurance coverage?" The nurse hesitated. "Barely. She's paying out of pocket for some of the treatment." Roman exhaled slowly. "Transfer the balance to my account, anonymously." "Doctor, you sure? Just do it." He told himself it was nothing, a practical decision. But as he signed the form, he realized his hand was trembling. 2 nights later, he returned to check on her again, against every professional boundary he'd ever upheld. Zaria sat by the window, watching snow drift past the parking lot lights. "You really saved me," she said quietly. "But you don't look like you believe in miracles." He gave a wry smile. "I believe in adrenaline and timing." "What about people?" "People are unpredictable." She tilted her head. "That's what makes them worth saving." That silence again, electric, fragile. He finally asked, "Why were you out there that night?" Her smile faded. "I was walking home. My old rickety car stopped running because of the storm. Guess God was done giving me rides." He almost said something cynical, but her tone stopped him. There was no self-pity, just acceptance. A knock interrupted them. Chief Ellison again. He eyed the scene, one eyebrow raised. "Well, look at that, the Ice King making bedside visits." Roman bristled. "What do you need, Chief?" Ellison flipped a page in his notebook. "Thought you'd like to know, no criminal record on Ms. Fields, but interesting coincidence. Your car's dash cam stopped recording right before the incident. Care to explain?" Roman frowned. "Electrical interference, it happens." Zaria glanced between them, uneasy. "You think he hurt me?" Ellison shrugged. "Snow hides a lot of truth. Just doing my job." Roman's voice turned razor sharp. "Then do it somewhere else." When the chief left, the air felt colder than the snow outside. Zaria looked at him softly. "He's just protecting me. That's what people with hearts do." Roman met her gaze, unflinching, but something cracked behind his eyes. "And what do people without hearts do, Zaria?" She didn't blink. They learn, eventually. Hours later, she fell asleep mid-sentence. Roman sat by her bedside again, watching the rise and fall of her chest. Steady now. Peaceful. For years, his world had been measured in incisions, vitals, and outcomes. But here, in the quiet hum of monitors, he realized something he'd buried deep. The absence of feeling was not peace. It was rot. He reached for his coat, hesitated, and instead pulled the blanket a little higher over her shoulders. Some people walk into your life just to remind you that you've stopped feeling. If you've ever met someone who thought a part of you didn't know was frozen, maybe that's a reason to keep walking with stories like this. So unfreeze and subscribe today. The snow began to melt, leaving gray slush along the edges of Woodward Avenue. It should have felt like relief, but for Roman Hale, it only meant things were thawing he wasn't ready to face. For a week, he'd checked on Zaria under the guise of medical observation. But even he couldn't lie to himself anymore. He came for her voice, her laugh, the way she challenged him without fear. Zaria had been discharged, yet she still lingered at the hospital, volunteering to help with the community health fair. Roman watched her from across the lobby as she talked with patients, smiling like someone who hadn't almost died in the snow. When she noticed him, she called out, "Dr. Hale, you stalking me now?" He tried not to smile, but failed. Just making sure you're not passing out in any more parking lots. She laughed softly, but before he could respond, Chief Ellison appeared behind her. "Afternoon, Doctor," the chief said, holding a folder. "Mind if I ask about this again?" Roman's stomach tightened. "What's that?" "Your dash cam footage. We pulled it from your vehicle's onboard system. The last image before it cut off wasn't snow. It was a figure standing in the road." Zaria's smile faltered. "Wait, are you saying he—" Ellison's gaze didn't waver. "We're not saying anything. But the woman you hit? She had bruises that don't match a fall." Roman snapped. "Those were from hypothermia and CPR compressions. You're chasing ghosts." "Maybe," Ellison said, turning to Zaria. "But sometimes ghosts are the ones telling the truth." When he left, the silence between them wasn't peaceful anymore. That night, Roman returned to Bloomfield Hills estate. The house felt bigger, emptier. He poured whiskey, but it didn't burn enough to distract him. On his desk lay a file, Zaria Fields. He'd pulled it using his hospital access, trying to understand her. But buried inside were notes from a patient file 6 years old, her mother's. Late-stage heart failure. His surgery had saved her once, but complications had brought her back last year to another surgeon. She hadn't survived. And Roman Hale's name was still on the original rejection form, a form that had delayed her procedure by a critical 72 hours. His chest went hollow. Zaria's mother had died because of hospital bureaucracy. His bureaucracy. He stood there for a long time, the snowlight glowing through the windows, realizing the woman who'd called him a man without a heart might be right in more ways than one. The next morning, Zaria arrived at the estate gates, invited by one of Roman's assistants to discuss a job offer, a charitable nursing position funded by his hospital. She thought it was a kindness. Instead, she found him pacing by the grand piano, glass still in hand. "You knew who I was," he said without greeting. She frowned. "What are you talking about?" He threw the file onto the table. Her mother's name stared up at her. "Your mother was my patient once. You came to my hospital years later, and somehow you end up fainting right in front of my car?" Her eyes widened. "You think I planned that?" "I think coincidences don't pile up this neatly." Her voice trembled but didn't break. "My mom always said you saved lives like God was whispering in your ear. I didn't even know it was you that night, Roman. I was freezing and scared, not scheming." He wanted to believe her, but guilt twisted logic into suspicion. "Then why didn't you tell me your mother was under my care?" "Because it wouldn't have changed anything. She still died waiting for help from men like you." His composure shattered. "Don't you dare make me your redemption story." Zaria took a step closer, eyes glistening. "You think I wanted that?" "I was grateful, Roman. I am grateful, but you're so used to being worshipped, you don't know what to do when someone just wants you to feel." He turned away, fists clenched. "I'm not built for feeling." She whispered, "Then maybe you were never meant to save me." And just like that, she was gone, walking out into the cold again. 2 days passed. Roman didn't go to work. He didn't eat. He just watched the snow fall over the empty estate like penance. He thought about her mother, about the system that made him rich and made others desperate, about how he'd mistaken power for control. Chief Ellison called once more, saying they'd confirmed from witness footage that he hadn't hit Zaria. She'd collapsed before he reached her. But the truth didn't ease him. It only proved he'd accused the one person who'd never asked him for anything. Meanwhile, Zaria took a bus back toward Ferndale, sitting beside a little girl clutching a ragged teddy bear. The child smiled up at her. My grandpa says snow is God's way of covering up the world's mistakes. Zaria smiled sadly. Then maybe he should make it snow forever. The old man, sitting behind them, looked up from his newspaper. No, darling, then we'd never see what we were supposed to fix. The words lingered, slicing deeper than they should have. She realized she wasn't angry at Roman. She was angry at how much she wanted him to be better than his past. Back at Bloomfield Hills, Roman finally walked outside without his coat, letting the cold bite through his skin. He whispered to the night, "You were right, Zaria. Not everything needs fixing. Some things need forgiving." The sky gave no answer, just more falling white. The blizzard had long passed, but Michigan still wore winter like a bruise. The frozen lakes glimmered under a gray sky, the kind that made everything feel unfinished. For Dr. Roman Hale, that was the point. His story with Zaria Fields wasn't over. He hadn't stepped into an operating room for weeks. Rumors spread through St. Joseph Mercy Hospital that the miracle doctor had lost his edge. In truth, he'd finally found something worth losing it for. A volunteer program had quietly started under his name. Free cardiac screenings for low-income families across Detroit. No cameras, no press, just vans, nurses, and hope. He was there every day, sleeves rolled up, doing the work no one paid him for. But every time the doors opened, he half expected her to walk in. One Friday, Chief Ellison stopped by the clinic. "Place looks different without the headlines," he said. Roman smirked faintly. "So do I." Ellison leaned against the counter. "You know, I figured you'd track her down by now." Roman's hands stilled over the paperwork. "She doesn't owe me forgiveness." "Maybe not," Ellison said, heading for the door. "But sometimes the people we hurt don't know they're allowed to heal unless we show up." The words hung in the air like breath in cold weather. That night, Roman drove to Ferndale, following an address he'd found on a volunteer sign-in sheet. He parked outside a small apartment building that smelled of wood smoke and fried chicken from the diner next door. Zaria opened the door before he could knock twice. She looked surprised, but not angry, just tired in the way only forgiveness can make you. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "I know," he replied, "but I had to see you." She crossed her arms. "What for? Another accusation?" He shook his head. "An apology." Her silence dared him to mean it. "I looked into your mother's file," he said. "I realized I delayed her surgery because I was protecting a hospital budget. I saved numbers, not people. I'm sorry, Zaria, for her, for you, for every life I treated like a ledger entry." Tears shimmered but didn't fall. "That won't bring her back." "No," he whispered, "but maybe it can keep someone else from losing theirs." She studied him for a long moment. "Why tell me now?" "Because the only way I know how to change is to start with the person who made me want to." They walked together down the snow-dusted sidewalk, neither speaking. At the corner, a little girl slipped on ice and burst into tears. Zaria ran forward, kneeling beside her. Roman followed, steadying the child's arm, checking for breaks. The girl sniffled. "You a doctor?" Roman nodded, trying to be a better one. Her mother thanked them and hurried off. Zaria turned to him, something shifting behind her eyes. "You could have ignored that." "I used to," he said simply. For the first time she smiled. A small, quiet thing, but it melted something ancient between them. Weeks later, the hospital held a charity gala at the Detroit Institute of Arts, proceeds funding the new outreach program Roman had created. The board wanted him to speak, but he declined, until he saw Zaria in the crowd, wearing a simple navy dress and a look that said, "Don't hide now." He stepped onto the stage. The lights felt harsher than an operating room. "I've spent my career measuring life in seconds," he began. "But what I've learned lately is that seconds mean nothing if they're not shared." He paused, eyes finding hers. "Sometimes the people we save are the ones who teach us how to live. Sometimes they pull us out of the snow." The audience applauded. Zariah's hands trembled as she clapped, tears sliding freely now. Afterward, outside beneath the museum's marble steps, snow began to fall again. Gentle, deliberate. Zariah laughed softly. "Guess the world's mistakes are getting covered up again." Roman smiled, remembering the bus conversation she'd told him about. "Then let's make new ones worth forgiving." She reached out her hand. "You think you can handle feeling now, Dr. Hale?" He took it without hesitation. "I'm counting on it." Their breath mingled in the cold. The city noise faded until there was only the rhythm of 2 heartbeats finding pace. And there, under the falling snow, the man once called Heartless found warmth that no scalpel could restore. If you've ever seen someone try to make things right after it was too late, you know how rare that courage is. Stories like this aren't just endings. They're reminders that second chances exist. Maybe that's something worth staying for. Thank you for staying with me until the very last moment of this story. If something in it, even a single glance, a breath, a heartbeat, reached you, then this story did what it was meant to do. Every view, every heartbeat that listens, keeps this little world of stories alive. So before you go, take a quiet second. Become part of this journey. Subscribe, not just to follow a channel, but to stay connected to the next story waiting to speak to your heart. The next one goes even deeper. More truth, more love, more healing, and it's already waiting for you. Your next story begins right here,